So today we'll look at the new space race that's going on. Uh, because you might know about the old space race, by which I mean the space race that took place between US and the USSR in the late 1960s, or I would say from late 1950s to early 1970s. And since then, like the competition to get into space and to make advancements has pretty much become non-existent. But over the past 10 years, it has come to life again. And so we'll look at this video and we'll get a sense of what has been the timeline over the past 10, 15 years. And then
Mhm.
I have some other points that I'll discuss and I'll show you as well. So I think we can start this one.
Let's go back in time, shall we?
So you can listen to the audio.
Yeah.
Okay.
October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union launched a satellite. The word satellite wasn't even common at the time. They launched an artificial moon around Earth. It was called Sputnik 1. It was a radio transmitter that sent out just bleep signals. Bleep, bleep.
Hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite.
What was it launched in? A hollowed out intercontinental ballistic missile shell. That's what it was launched with. So, here in the United States, we completely freaked out for multiple reasons. First, they beat us at something technological that, they're not supposed to, because they're communists. And we are free market enterprise, high-tech America. How could they possibly beat us at something that required clear advances in science, technology, engineering, and math? That spooked us, A. B, the military is spooked because if they can send a hollowed out intercontinental ballistic missile over our heads, they can send one that contains a warhead. By the way, your airspace is sort of a sovereign place. Other countries can't fly over your country in your airspace without your explicit permission to do so. But a satellite orbits above the atmosphere. So it is not technically your airspace. It's your space. But there were no treaties about space before. Within a year, middle of 1958, President Eisenhower would sign into law the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Act, where we reallocated resources, other smaller agencies, and together, by the first week of October, the doors of NASA were open for business. By the way, NASA is a civilian agency, yet practically every astronaut who was selected and flew was drawn from the military, either the active military or on detail from the military or retired military. All right, we're off to the races, literally off to the races. So Russia puts up the first satellite. They put up the first non-human animal, Laika, a dog, a homeless dog from the streets of Moscow. Never had plans to bring the dog back alive, by the way, burned up on re-entry. They put up the first human, that was Yuri Gagarin. All of this, before we could put up a human, they did all of that, okay? And we're struggling mightily to do something because we were getting bested. So, John F. Kennedy, May 1961, 6 weeks after Yuri Gagarin successfully comes out of orbit, gives a speech to the joint session of Congress and says, if the events of recent weeks are any indication of the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere, then we need to show the world the path of freedom over the path of tyranny. It was a battle cry against communism. How else are you going to get Congress to write checks? There's a lot of stirring language around that speech and others he gave at that time that made you think this is an American thing to do. But at the end of the day, it got done because we perceived a threat. Our sworn enemy in the Cold War was beating us at a highly visible science and technology activity. So Kennedy says, let's go to the moon. that would leapfrog all of the Russian advances. So we target the moon, thus was born the Apollo project. We go from Mercury, which hosts 1 astronaut per launch, to Gemini, hosting, guess how many? Of course, 2 Gemini, followed by Apollo, 3 astronauts to the moon and back. We tell ourselves we won that race because we declared the finish line to be the moon. But practically every other important benchmark for access to space, Russia did first. They put up the first woman in orbit, the first dark-skinned person, a Cuban. Remember, Cuba was on their side at the time. Did all this before we did. And we don't tell ourselves that enough because we I think justifiably, we celebrate the fact that we got to the moon, and that's an interesting target for anybody, for our species. And in all fairness to we as Americans, the plaque that's on the moon says, "We come in peace for all mankind." That's what it says. And there's a picture of the Earth, the 2 halves of the Earth. We didn't say, "We have conquered the moon and we will try." Yes, there's an American flag there because that's what people do when you're in a mountaintop and things. But the plaque that contains the messaging, that felt honest to me. So when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, the 3 astronauts on Apollo 11, returned to Earth, they were received worldwide. And if you speak to Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, at the time, what they would tell you is people would come up to them and not say, "You did it." They would say, "We did it. We, humans, did it." And I was particularly moved upon learning that, because any triumph of science and technology is really for us all, because we're humans, and these are triumphs of the human mind and our ingenuity. So we land on the moon in 1969. We stopped going to the moon in 1972. Russia wasn't there. No longer was there geopolitical motivation to pursue that activity.
So I'll stop here a little bit. So, any thoughts so far?
No, not really. Like it has been just an history lesson. So he's explaining what has been already happened.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just mention a few comments here. So what I think was that uh, even though they have mentioned that, and also there's this whole argument about capitalism is that we are more capitalism promotes more creativity because it has more competition. On the other hand, like socialism and communism, that it's completely opposite. But what happened here was the opposite. A socialist
Mhm.
country started it first, and it was only their reaction to that which led them to come up with the plan to go to the moon. In fact, they did not even have NASA, any space organization before this. NASA was created as a reaction to this thing.
Mhm.
And as you'll come to know uh, in this coming sections, it's the same thing. Again, this new space race is also a reaction, but this time instead of the Russia or the USSR, it's China. It's going to be China, as you'll see very soon. So that's one thing I want to say. And second thing, it also mentioned something about the term "for all mankind," which reminded me of the series "For All Mankind." So I watched the series and like I'm still watching the 4th season. It's not completed yet, but it also speaks about the same space race, but it now takes upon an alternative history. Like, what if the space race never ended? So that's what happens. Like, first Russia goes to the moon, then US, and this keep continuing. And by 2000, they have a colony on space, on moon, and as well as a colony on Mars. So that's like an alternative version of what could have happened if this space just never ended. So that was interesting. So continue. Now I think so he's going to talk about why we stop going to the moon and what's going to restart it again.
People not knowing why we were going to the moon watched us go to the moon and say, "Oh, at this rate, by 1980, we'll be on Mars." In the year 2000, we'll have thousands of people living and working in space. We only went to beat the Soviets. That's it. So, 1972, the program gets canceled. People want to blame Nixon. No, you don't blame, yes, he was president, but you don't blame Nixon for that. You recognize the geopolitical forces that make any of this happen to begin with. We could have stayed on the moon in 1972. We didn't. Could have gone back in 1980. We didn't. 1990, 2000, 2010. No. Is anyone else going to the moon? No. So we don't feel the force operating on our ambitions. Again, we are reactive as a nation way more and way more effectively than we are proactive. 2004, I'm appointed by George W. Bush to serve on a White House commission to study the future of NASA. What sort of missions should it have? By the way, there were no geopolitical forcing on us at the time. It's just NASA. There's NASA. We got NASA. We went to the moon back then. What should we do in the future? I'm on this commission. It was nicknamed the Moon and Mars Commission. What we did was lay out a path for us to continue our presence and advance in space and how to go on to Mars beyond that. We created this plan to use monies that NASA had been using for the space shuttle and phase that out and phase in a plan to return to the moon and go on to Mars. So there's no new money here. It would just be a readjustment of it. Well, some budget people got a hold of it and noticed that it might take $1 trillion to get to Mars. And it was DOA. In peacetime, spend $1 trillion? No. NASA's budget was already $30 billion a year. 30 billion. So how long does it take to get to $1 trillion at $30 billion a year? It takes 30 years. We could get to Mars in 30 years with astronauts, of course, I'm referring to. But that's not the number that landed heavily on people's conscience. It was the $1 trillion. All right, so fine, but we did the really good homework for that report. And there it languishes. We go into the 20-teens. 2016, Trump gets elected president. Okay? You know what's happening around then? China says they want to put taikonauts on the moon. Everything China has said they want to do in space, they have done in space. Let's rewind for a moment. Back when we stopped going to the moon, we wanted to do something interesting in space. They said, let's have a space station. Originally, it was Space Station Freedom. Then the Soviet Union collapses. There are Russian scientists. We don't want them going to whoever might be the new enemy. We want to make friends with them. So we turned the Space Station Freedom into the International Space Station, and the principal international partners is the United States and Russia. Then Europe joins in and other countries as well. But that means they are our friends post-Cold War era. We said, China, not you. You're not invited because you have human rights violations that we will hold against you and prevent you from participating with the rest of us. I'm a scientist, not a politician, so I don't know how serious, severe, or widespread human rights violations are around the world at any given time, but I do know the consequence of disinviting China. We're now talking about the 1990s into the 2000s. They have a rapidly growing economy. And anytime you have a growing economy, there is money to spend on things, on whatever you want, for whatever are your purposes. So China births their space program. They said they're going to put an astronaut in orbit. A taikonaut is their word for astronaut. Taikonauts in orbit. They're going to create a space station. There it is. Whatever they said they're going to do, they're going to do. So when they said, we want to put astronauts on the moon, we sat up straight. And under Trump, Trump says, let's task NASA to go back to the moon. And it sounded like, well, where did this come from? We haven't been there in 30 years. Why are you saying it now? So there were Trump haters that said he's just boosting his own ego here. But there's a geopolitical force operating. NASA creates a new program called Artemis. This would be to return to the moon with a crew, okay? And ultimately pitch tent there. set up a base camp, not a colony so much as a research station on the moon. Once again, we are reacting to a perceived threat, be it real or imagined. There's a handoff from President Trump to President Biden, and Biden doesn't say, Trump, this moon thing, that was just a vanity project. We're going to cancel it. No, it's sustained. That's what happens when you're reacting geopolitically rather than local politically. Geopolitics rides above it all. Yes, the Artemis program is still in play. There are a bunch of delays. By the way, so is China. Oh. Anyhow, when China went to the moon, they made a flag that was stitched out of basalt. Basalt is rock, volcanic rock. It will never fade. It will never decompose. Ultraviolet light has nothing to say to it. And so it's little things like that kind of, in America, we say, we got to do something. We got to do something better, something more inventive. By the way, none of that's going to happen if we keep cutting science budgets and NASA's budget. If we keep cutting science the way we are, then other countries that are not cutting science will rise up past us. And we will stand at the fence wondering how they did it. But maybe one day we all go into space together. Actually, that's the goal of the Artemis Accord. It's a document of behavior and ethics for the future of space exploration. For example, if you go into space and you're a nation, a sovereign nation, you conduct an experiment and you learn that something could put future astronauts at risk, this commits you to share those results with other countries so that their astronauts are not put at risk. And when you share information, then in a way, even if you're going into space separately, if the information is shared, because that's how science works, then everyone is effectively going into space together. Meanwhile, Russia and China, who have not signed the Artemis Accords, actually have an agreement with each other for their future of establishing base stations on the moon, not only research on its surface, but in orbit. And they've invited other countries to participate in that pact. So we'll see how this plays out in the future. I'd like to think space is for everybody because it's vast. It is a little weird when you think about it. There's a little speck called Earth, and we've divided up the land masses as we have. And then we go into space and we want to divide up space. As an astrophysicist, that's freaking absurd, okay? Just between you and me, just so you know. This is another What's Up With That? The space race on Star Talk. Neil deGrasse Tyson bidding you to keep looking up.
So, any comments?
So yeah, I think it's true. If the space race had continued, then we might have seen a lot of advancement so far. But I think that speaks to the nature of ambition in general. Like, ambition is always relative. I think people have to be competing in order to keep growing, I suppose. So let's say someone reaches a level they always wanted to, and there is no one else to take that position away from them, then they will become complacent. There's no need to push anymore. But if you see someone else is coming for their position, then that is when they will start to progress further. So in similar to how businesses work. For example,
Yes.
Google also for so many years they were doing a lot of technological innovation, but they had become somewhat complacent. But as soon as OpenAI came up with their ChatGPT thing, you can see how fast they started progressing, and by the end of 2025, people are saying Gemini is the strongest LLM model there is. So yeah, I think without the need to compete, maybe people become complacent. Maybe people slow down, that motivation is not there. But again, but what I see, like the reactionary thing they're talking about is mostly in relation to making a statement. Like they want to be, like US wants to be known as the first to do things. But in regards to many other space-related discoveries or research, I think it is thanks to the US that we know so much about the universe as a whole. All the discoveries about different galaxies, different black holes, how it works, it's all from data from the different programs they have, like the different rovers that have been gone to Mars. I think it's the only US that has sent probes to the outer solar system. So studying up to Pluto and stuff. No other country has sent probes that far. Even to the sun, I think there's one called the Parker Solar Probe. So when it comes to actual curiosity of knowing about the universe, I don't think US ever stopped. But yeah, and in actual people who are interested in this kind of research would know that all the data is coming from the uh, different programs from the US. But maybe if the space race had continued, we would have colonized Mars or at least set up some base camps in Moon and stuff. But I don't know why it was not their priority. Maybe they don't see any practical reason. So I don't know what research could you do that you could not, what research can you do from Moon that you cannot do from Earth, other than making a statement that you have a base camp there.
In terms of research, definitely things could be done because even right now, there's the International Space Station because it certain experiments are done there to see the effects of certain any kind of any kind of experiment, how it performs in gravity versus when it's not in gravity or when it's not in the surface of a planet. How does it react? So similarly, something could be learned about how things might happen in a different planet. So yeah, it could be done experiment scientific from a science experiment point of view. But uh, I mentioned about this thing. So as I said, like in the near future, I'll focus more on science. But at the same time, we have named it decoding the everything because deep inside, I know that a lot of things are ultimately interconnected. They influence each other, and that's the connection that's the overarching goal of this whole project of decoding the everything. And to borrow the idea that I used in uh, understanding the nature of society and humans. So one of the core or the fundamental ideas that I had previously talked about is the need for, initially I described two things, wealth and power. And the third I can also include fame slash public perception. But right now we can wealth and power is enough to explain this one. You have mentioned it correctly, like this race initially in the 1960s and 70s. Why was it there? Because it was mostly about not wealth but power. Like they wanted to show that we are the most powerful one because someone else did
Mhm.
it, because the USSR did it, and it seems like US thought that it doesn't show us like we're not the most powerful one. We're not the alpha male or something like this. So I'm going to do it just because I want to show that I'm the better one. And once that was achieved, you don't have any more incentive anymore. That okay, I proved it.
Mm.
But then there's another kind of motivation. That's the wealth. So I think in capitalistic society, or I don't think, yeah, it could be any kind of society, but yes, if that motivation is there, like there is a there's money to be made from this activity, then also we can do this. So I think most of the race in AI could be explained from that point of view. Between the
Mhm.
companies, it can be explained from that point of view, but between US and China, it can be explained from the power point of view. Like US and China is less about making more money, is more about being the most powerful one, to show that I'm the
Mhm.
most powerful one. But from the company wise, if it's OpenAI versus Google, it's about not being the most powerful, but being having the most ability to make money. And I think this, and again, coming to now connecting to the third part of our decoding the everything, which is decoding the future or predicting the future. Now, this kind of fundamental hypothesis or theories that I make, can it help me predict how it's going to happen? So this is what I think. Now, since I've connected this to power and wealth, now if this new space race, the Artemis program and so on, if this is based on simply power, and if so, what will happen is that if USA manages to beat China, then they, regardless of whatever they speak now, this time it's not just a race. This time we're trying to build a permanent base on moon. They might say these things, but working in marketing, I know that you need to hype up the community for your program to be pushed. This may not be your true intentions, but you have to hype up the whole, because you have to hype up the whole nation to back up this thing. So that may not be the objective to create a permanent base there. But if so, what I mean to say is that if your only intention is to beat China, once you beat China, it will again stop. It won't
Mhm.
continue. But if you find a long-term commercial benefits there, I think it could be a permanent thing. And And today's video is more of the introduction section to space in general, because in the coming more weeks or days, I'll talk more about space and so on. So I'll also talk about the commercial objectives there, about SpaceX and Elon Musk's plan and so on. But this time it's not just the race between US and China. There are plans by SpaceX, Elon Musk, and a lot of other things are also there, which is why I think it's not just a power thing anymore this time. At least for US and China, it could be, but again, now SpaceX is also involved, and they have their intentions there. And
Mhm.
one of the things is that there's water on moon, and if and that could be one, like if a financial or a wealth from a wealth point of view, that could be one motivation. And if you could find something precious there that could be mined and created, or any kind of like commercial value, if you find there, I think that
Mhm.
would be the only reason that will make this whole program or this whole space initiative a long term and a permanent one, instead of just once you beat them, it's over. So that remains to be seen. We'll talk more about this in upcoming days and weeks.
Yeah.
Okay,
So yeah,
so
so I'll
yeah,
fundamentally, I think as long as there is a competition, people will start progressing, people will start innovating. As soon as competition dies, people will stop. Like, I think that is that speaks to the nature of human beings itself. So yeah, so as long as there will be some competition from some country, there will be progress made. And even like eh, as per the principles of that, what was his name? The war principles of world order or something.
yes,
So I think e- Ray Dalio maybe.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, so I think many people at least now see the competition between US and China as a very real thing. People are seeing
yes,
the US power coming down and China's power going up. So they definitely have an incentive now to continue the space race and be number one in there already, because in terms of AI, people are seeing this shift. It's no longer just US. People also talk about China. In EVs also, it's no longer just US. Maybe it is mostly dominated by China. So this is
Yes.
another step where US seems to be losing. They can't afford to lose ground anymore like that if they want to be seen as number one.
Yes.
So maybe, yeah, maybe if they win this, they have one thing to talk about as number one. Maybe if they lose, China becomes the number one. And I don't know what intrinsic motivation China also will have to keep continuing if they become number one. Maybe then some other country has to come up as a competition for progress to continue. So yeah, that is to be seen.
Yes. And as I mentioned, there are more than one country, more than two countries now. So briefly, I have written down something I'll share with you about
Mhm.
the countries that have landed on moon so far. Let me share this. So can you see this one?
No, oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. So far, five countries have landed on the moon. And by
Mm.
five countries, by landed on the moon, I mean that without humans, no human landing. As far as human
Mhm.
landings are concerned, only US has landed moons, landed humans on moon so far. Yeah. So far, okay, let me just talk about this one briefly. So far, only US has landed humans on moon, 12 humans, 12 astronauts between July 1966 and December 1972. So those are
Mhm.
the, so 12 astronauts between them. USSR has never landed any humans on moon, even though they started a lot of things, but unfortunately they couldn't manage to land any humans on moon. That was a brief one. But overall, five countries have made soft landings on the moon. Again, by soft landing, what it means is that the landing was intentional and controlled. It just didn't crash into the moon. So technically,
Mhm.
that's also a landing, but once it crashes, your equipments are of no use. So when
Mhm.
the landing is intentional or successful, it's called a soft landing. So far, five countries have managed it. So you can see the first one was Russia. They did it on 3rd of February 1966. Then it was the USA 3 months later on 1966. And there was a long gap, and that's where the China race began. So they
Mhm.
landed their first rover or thing on the on moon on December 23, 2013. And India was the fourth one. So they did it about 2 years ago, and they landed the Chandrayaan 3. And last year, I think it's almost going to be 2 years now. Japan was the fifth one. They did on 19th of January 2024. And this was
Mhm.
only about the landing of probes in the moon. Now, as far as sending people on space, I don't have the data. I have to look into it. So obviously, US and Russia definitely did it. And in this video, we also learned about that China also put man on space. So we also know about this, but I am not sure about the other countries. I'm not sure if India put any astronauts on space or not.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, as ISRO, I don't know if any Indians went to space as part of NASA or something else. I am not sure, but I don't know. I'm also not sure if ISRO sent anything. Those are the things I have to look at.
But as
Yeah.
part of NASA, I think people from India, like at least Indian origin people have went, right?
Yeah, I know I knew about Sunita Williams and Kalpana Chawla, but I don't know they
Yeah.
are Indians or Indian. Sunita Williams is definitely
I,
not Indian. She's
mm.
Indian origin.
I mean Indian
Kal
origin, but I guess US citizen maybe, but not Indian.
yeah. Even Kalpana Chawla was uh, Indian origin. Let me just look into it. With 3 minutes left, so briefly.
Indian American.
She was born in, where was she born? Haryana. So she was Indian.
Mhm.
Yeah, she studied in, yeah. Okay, so she was born and she studied in India. Then she went to US, so she's more of an Indian.
Mhm.
Or I think was I she was born in US as well. Yeah, Ohio, US. Like
Mhm.
she's more of an Indian American. Yeah. So that was it. Do you have anything else to say here?
No.
Okay, so I think I can end this one. I have something else to say, but I'll end this one now.
Mhm.